First of all, Commander Chris Hadfield. Well, do I call you Chris? Do I call you Commander? Do I call you Darth Hadfield?
Whatever you like. I mean, I was a colonel in the Air Force. I commanded a spaceship. I'm a dad. Just Chris is fine. Whatever you like, Ray. What do I call you? Ray, okay?
Ray's perfectly, or
Great.
you, or it, or hey.
All right.
I answer to all of the above. You're Canadian, of course. Are you? You're in Canada at the moment? Are you at
I
home?
am. I've been in Canada since the pandemic lockdown continuously, which, I've traveled my entire life and I've been around the world 2,600 times. It's unusual to be, I've been in the same bed with my wife for 10 months. It just hasn't been like that. There's been so much travel in our lives. So it's been a really unusual phase of life. But yes, I'm in Canada right now,
Yeah.
in Toronto, where our home is.
You were doing lockdown though before it was cool. Yeah, in
I've been
space.
locked down since March. We've been heavily locked down. But also, as you say, oh, by the way, this is Poppy the kitten.
Hi,
I
Poppy.
I I was locked down in space for half a year, physically isolated and surrounded by danger, and not ever really knowing when it was going to end. So yeah, this isn't really that new an experience.
Yeah. How many people were on the space? Well, this your last long mission in space was the 5 months you did. How many people were there with you?
On board a spaceship, there are 6 beds, 2 toilets, and seats, lifeboats for 6 people. So at that time, 6 people. Occasionally, we'd go down to 3 when one ship was leaving and another one was coming back, and sometimes we'd go up to 9 if a ship arrived early. But normally 6. Now with the new ships up there, they're up to 7 or even more at a time. Just depends on, in an emergency, how many seats you can jump into to come back to Earth. That's the limiting factor.
With that limited number of people or that limited amount of human interaction, and I suppose a lot of people in lockdown are confronted with this reality as well, and they'd want to ask you, given your experience, how do you avoid getting on one another's nerves?
I think the first step is personal, and that is accept the reality of your own life. Don't wish for some moment in the past or just wish for some moment in the future. Actually go, hey, this is where I am. This is me. I'm here. These are the rules for today. This is where I am. Okay. So don't spend your time fretting that you're not somewhere else, because that's kind of pointless. The second is, especially with a small group of people, agree on what victory looks like. Like, if today goes perfectly, what will have happened? We won't have had any arguments, or we will have made a birthday cake, or whatever. Someone will have gone to the store, or on a spaceship, whatever. Experiments done. Everyone will have exercised. But give yourself an agreed to set of objectives for the day and what success might look like for the day. And then be super kind, because everyone else is dealing with it. And you be kind to yourself. You're not normal in these circumstances, and so the people around you aren't either. So cut everybody else some slack, especially the people down in mission control, because they're just a disembodied voice, but they're just folks and they're having troubles. And then the last thing is, find ways to celebrate. We got a new kitten, as you can see here, but every single day there's beautiful stuff happens. You can find it online, or look out the window, or laugh and learn a new joke or whatever. Find ways to celebrate within the reality of where you are. And it may not be, the same as some magical dream you had for your whole life, but there's still good and interesting things that happen every single day. So take note of them and make a point of sharing and celebrating them with the people around you. And then maybe at the last word is forgive yourself. Hey, today didn't, when you get to the time, you go, today
That
didn't
all
go as well
totally
as I wanted.
applies. That actually
But,
genuinely does.
And with all of those things, we thrive on a spaceship. We look forward to every day. We get a whole bunch of stuff done. And that's really how my wife and my family and I have been making our way through COVID. And, we'll eventually land this spaceship, but for now we're still in the midst of it. And that's the reality of life.
Yeah. You didn't have the trials or the tribulations of homeschooling to deal with. So you had that. I mean, you had a little bit softer than the rest of us. I'm joking, of course. Hundreds of people have been on the space station since the year 2000. There's been people up there all the time. Hundreds of people up and down all the time.
Yep.
But you were the one, I suppose, most recently that captured our imaginations. You're the one that made us all look up. And I suppose you inspired us all to start looking up at the stars again. What would you, I suppose social media had a lot to do with it.
Well, everyone else, all the other astronauts have the same access to things that I did.
Mm.
I think a large part of it, Ray, was when I was a kid watching the Apollo program and the first Americans going to the moon. At the same time, the Soviets were flying in space, but they kept the whole thing closed and secret. And they only ever told people about what happened afterwards when it had gone well. The Americans, on the other hand, said, this is one of the grandest human adventures ever. And we're just going to let everybody see everything that happens while it's going on. And, you know, if someone swears or somebody crashes or something horrible happens, so be it. It's just part of the process. And that lunar landing on July 20th, 1969, it was the most viewed event at the time in human history. Mm-hmm. And it inspired 1 billion people around the world to think about themselves differently. You know, there were more PhDs per capita in the US in the 10 years after that than ever before or ever since. People saw themselves differently as a result of how the Americans chose to let people share the Apollo program. And I think it just sort of set a bit with me that if I ever get to do anything fun or cool or publicly interesting, I'm not going to just keep it to myself. I'm going to use whatever tools there are, you know, ham radio or write a blog or if there's social media, use that, whatever, and just share it the best that I can. And I'm still doing the same thing. I think it's important. Don't squander the beautiful and interesting parts of your own life and not let other people benefit from it if you possibly can. And I love the results around the world that have come from, obviously from the Apollo program, but also from the things that I did and the things I've tried to share.
Yeah, I'd say that, well, it's certainly been the case in our house. The sales of telescopes and viewfinders has been insane. Just off the back, and the photographs were, of course, in Ireland, we loved the photographs of Ireland. We're that vain. Take a photograph of us, put it up, and we'll love you for it.
Ray, I don't know if you know, but in Irish Parliament, right after my flight, they talked about it and what impact it might have on Irish youth.
Yep.
And the number of kids that went into science and math in university the next year had a measurable increase. I forget the number, like 18% more than previously. Kids went into topics that they might not have had the bravery to go into otherwise. There was an immediate, measurable impact of my space flight in choices that young Irish kids were making. And I'm really delighted to know that. It's not just all, fun and such, but it changes how people choose to live their lives, hopefully for a more productive way.
Yeah. Speaking of inspiration, our very own Adam King from near Youghal, he wants to work. We saw him on the Late Late Toy Show at the end of last year. He wants to work in NASA. You've got him a job already, I take it.
Well, he's still a tad young to be confirmed in a job. But when I was 6, like Adam is, that's when I was, you barely understand the difference between reality and fantasy at 6, although Adam's a pretty together young person, but he's in a very nurturing environment with his family. His parents are doing a great job. He's got some really good brothers and sisters. But I was making similar thoughts and decisions when I was his age. And I had no idea how to get there, but I sure knew what was exciting me and what book I was going to read next and what TV show I was going to watch and what I was going to try and do with the body and the mind I'd been given. So I hats off to Adam. He's not only doing good things with his own life, but I think he's really inspired a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's an inspiration. Not only you're his inspiration, and he's everybody else's, it seems, particularly given everything we're going through at the moment. Are you still in touch with your space station colleagues? I suppose you spend that much time together or living in each other's pockets. Do you stay in touch?
I work pretty heavily in the space program. Actually, I chair a lunar settlement foundation called Open Lunar, which happens to be on my mug here. I work with SpaceX. I work with Virgin Galactic. I work with the Canadian Space Agency and with NASA. I'm working with a company that is building rovers to land on the moon, and I work with another company that's working on space propulsion. And I'm writing a 4th book that has a space theme right now. So yeah, I'm self-employed. I'm doing all these things.
I was going to say, how's retirement treating you?
I run a technology incubator as well called Creative Destruction Lab. I run the whole space stream of all new space businesses for that, which has branches in several places around the world. So, yeah, I mean, well, it's
Keep him
I have no
busy.
desire to do nothing. I
Yeah.
want to stay involved, just like Adam. These are the things that interest me, and I want to use what skills I've got to be as productive and involved in those things as I can. Why wouldn't you?
One of your last famous homes was the International Space Station. There's talk of it potentially becoming a hotel, or one of the proposals for it from Russia as a hotel. What's the future for it? When is it going to come down? It's staying up for another while now, at least, anyway.
Yeah, well, the first piece went up in '98, and then
Mm.
people, as you say, started living there 20 years ago, or 20 years ago last November, so 20 and a half years ago almost now. It's built by 15 different countries, including Canada. And it was originally designed for 30 years. Each piece, when you have to say, how long should this, it's not like getting a new car, which is what, 8 years, maybe 10, but everything in the station was designed for 30 years. So 98, that would take us to, 2028.
Mm.
But, you can extend those pieces. So probably good for another decade or so. So there's a lot of work to do in the next decade with new ships going up there. We can do a lot of experimentation and science and development on the station in the next decade. But eventually, its orbit will decay and it'll burn up like a meteorite. And that's okay. That's just natural process. All machines eventually wear out. But between now and then, I mean, there's private companies launching people to space now. That's new and really great. That's like the difference between the First World War and the first airlines. Where now we take sort of this big government-driven technology push and turn it into potential business. Now, it's not going to become a hotel. I mean, it's not.
Okay.
The room service is lousy and it's not suited to that. But a few wealthy people may devote some part of their wealth and their life to trying to get there for a few days. Which it was sort of, like a big adventure trip or something. And there's been a few do that already with the Russians. So it could come into that vein. And I've heard that, Tom Cruise may try and film a little bit of a movie sequence up there. That's great. If the technology is good enough, that we can make it safe enough that an incompetent person like Tom, he's a terrific actor.
No offense, Tom. Yeah.
Movie person, but he's not, he's not
Of course,
spending 20 years of his life becoming an engineer and a test pilot and an astronaut. But he might be able to safely ride up to the station and back. And that's great. And we can put him in a position to do something that'll inspire millions of people. I think that's terrific. And it's just sort of the process, as meanwhile, we're heading towards how to take this technology, not just orbiting the world, but eventually, start settling the moon. We've found 400 billion liters of water frozen on the moon. And there's eternal sunlight at the poles of the moon. If you got sunlight eternally, never night, and if you've got vast reserves of water, then you've got the basics of life. All you need is a good habitat. So, it sounds sort of wild and crazy, but that's where we are in history, where our technology is good enough now to maybe start settling the moon like we've settled all the other places around the world. And that, that's all coming from the space station and as, the things we've learned in the last 30 years. So I think it's a pretty interesting time.
Yeah.
We've got to take care of COVID and all the problems on the earth. And we need the technology to deal with it and feed people and deal with the medical issues. None of that's diminished or gone away. But meanwhile, there's also some pretty adventurous and interesting things happening in the exploration of the rest of the universe.
Yeah, it's an amazing business to be in. I suppose that's the business you're in. Come up with an idea, make it happen, carry it through. It's fantastic. You mentioned private enterprise, and you mentioned SpaceX, and you mentioned you do some work with them. My question really was like, what do you make of the development of private enterprise and private businesses and their move into space? And then what does that mean then for bigger projects, like you mentioned the moon, but like what about Mars and beyond?
I think it's important, Ray, to remember that space has always been private business. The lunar lander was built by a private company, and the space shuttle was built by a private company, and all unmanned spaceflight, no people on a space, that's been completely private for decades, where a private company could hire another private company to put a satellite in space. So that's been going on for decades. It's just SpaceX does it like it's a TV show, like it's the Thunderbirds or something.
Entertainment,
it's just really inspiring the way he's doing it. But where it's headed, that's revolutionary, because very soon it may be possible to, if at first you need to be very wealthy, like flying when the technology is new, but to buy a ticket to go to the moon. And it sounds nuts, right? But when I was born, no one had flown in space. Space flight's younger than I am. And look how far we've come so quickly. So you just sort of have to recognize that things happen. I mean, look at one of these, right? I mean,
Yeah.
think how we take those for granted and just how crazy they would have been 20 years ago. So that's where we're headed. But then if a private company can take somebody to the moon, whose laws are they under? And what laws should they obey when they're on the moon? And what should the regulations be? And what country needs to get involved? And should we at this moment in history say, oh, we're just going to import a little China onto the moon and a little America onto the moon and a little European Space Agency on the moon, little Russia? I mean, that would be a dumb thing to do, given relatively clean slate of a continent that's bigger than Africa. You know, the moon is enormous, and we can choose. It's up to us. So yeah, I think it's an interesting problem. We'll make some mistakes, but we're also really thinking hard about it. NASA is working with the Artemis Accords to try and get a lot of people thinking about it. And there's always, everybody's got their own agendas, just like it should be. But the technology is enabling us to not only communicate like this and deal with a global health threat like COVID better than we sure did 100 years ago or ever have in the past, plagues and things.
Yeah.
But it's also opening up some really interesting ideas for the future. And maybe we can develop some models of settlement on the moon that'll teach us some stuff back here on the Earth. So, none of it's perfect, but I choose to be optimistic because I think we're at a really fascinating moment in history, enabled like we've never been before. And it's easy to focus on the negative, that takes no effort at all. But I would rather be part of the positive. And that's what I work on every day.
Very quickly, Space Force, have you been asked to be a commander or to put on your boots again for Trump's Space Force?
Yeah. Anything under that category is makes me shake my head. The United States has had a Space Force since the 1970s.
Yeah.
They just rebranded it because, the sitting president wanted to be able to take credit for something. And, that's okay. Most politicians do. So, if you understand what's going on and how the U.S. military has been in space since the 1950s, then,
it's a moot point. Yeah.
It's kind of a moot point. But, they made a nice crest that looks a lot like a Star Trek badge.
It sure does, doesn't it?
And the names it's just all window dressing. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of value that lies beyond the Earth's atmosphere. And so obviously we need to look at how we've built regulations and protections and legal structures and forces here on the surface of the Earth and think, okay, well, how's that going to work in orbit or on the moon or on Mars? And, we need to work on all those things.
Yeah.
But it's all just part of culture. And it's going to take a lot of people working hard to try and do it as best we can.
I've kept you for so long, Chris. But just before we go, your favorite space fiction on screen, on TV, movies, favorite space movie?
Well, my favorite space movie is, you're going to laugh, but it's Galaxy Quest.
Oh, yeah.
Ridiculous send up, but I just thought that movie did a great job of sending up Star Trek and all those things. But actually, everybody came off looking good in that movie. The aliens were good. The bad guys, they weren't so bad. The geeky kids were good. Everybody, I like that movie. The most accurate one I know of is Apollo 13. Okay. And The Martian is not bad. The book is better. And some of them are terrible. Space Cowboys or Armageddon or even Gravity. I mean, they make me wince. But hey, they're entertainment. They're not documentaries. But Apollo 13, it's and The Martian shows sort of what astronauts are like. Mark Watney, played by Matt Damon, that sort of gives you a feeling of the type of person that you need to be to actually be trusted to be an astronaut. But I like space movies. Why not?
Of course, yes. Tim Allen and Sigourney Weaver. I'll have to go and dig it out. Great movie.
Yeah, I really, really worth watching. I recently watched a kind of the making of, and it was even more insightful and fun. Yeah, I really enjoy Galaxy Quest.
Alan Rickman was in that, and apparently he said something scathing to Tim Allen about Tim Allen's acting. Did you see that, the comment? It was very good.
He did, yeah. Tim needed to take a break when he was doing this scene over and over and over again, and Rickman said, "I think he's just experienced acting."
That's exactly it.
Which cracked
Commander
me up.
Chris Hadfield, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it. Looking forward to the book. Do you have a title?
Yes, it'll be out in the fall. It's historical fiction set in 1973. It's called The Apollo Murders.
Lovely. We're looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having people read it. I think it'll be a pretty interesting story, and you might learn a little bit about space while you're getting entertained as well.
Chris, thanks a million. Have a lovely day and stay safe.
You also, Ray. Thanks very much, and pass my best to Adam's family when you get a chance.
I will, of course. Yeah, sure. They're local. They're local to us. Thanks a million.
All right. Thanks
Cheers,
a lot.
man.
Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye.